April 18th, 1943. 9:34 a.m. Admiral Yamamoto sat in the lead Mitsubishi bomber reviewing inspection reports as the coastline of Bougainville appeared below. The flight was on schedule. In 4 minutes he would be dead. He had no idea that 435 miles to the southeast, 18 American fighters had been hunting him for the past 2 hours. 5 days earlier, Lieutenant Alva Lassiter had signed his death warrant. April 13th, Pearl Harbor. Station Hypo, the basement where American codebreakers worked in windowless rooms that reeked of coffee and cigarette smoke. Lassiter sat at his decryption table at 2:17 a.m. processing routine Japanese naval traffic. He was exhausted. He had been on shift for 11 hours. Then he decoded a message that made his hands stop moving. The message was standard administrative communication. Fleet movements, inspection schedules, the kind of bureaucratic details that filled Japanese radio traffic every day. Except this message contained a name that every American in the Pacific wanted dead: Admiral Yamamoto. Lassiter read it again to make sure he understood. April 18th, departure from Rabaul at 600 hours. 2 medium bombers, 6 Zero fighters as escort. Flight route along the southern coast of Bougainville. Arrival at Balal Airfield at 0800 hours. The message even specified which aircraft Yamamoto would be in, the lead bomber. The Japanese had just handed America the exact time, location, and route of their most important naval commander. The man who had planned Pearl Harbor, the man who had killed Lassiter's younger brother on the USS Arizona on December 7th, 1941. Lassiter stared at the decoded message for 30 seconds. Then he realized something that made his stomach drop. If the United States used this information, if American fighters intercepted Yamamoto at exactly the right time and place, Japanese intelligence would ask one question: how did they know? And if Japan suspected their naval codes were compromised, they would change everything. Station Hypo would go blind. Every advantage America had gained from reading Japanese communications would disappear. The intelligence that had won the Battle of Midway would be gone. Lassiter walked upstairs and found Captain Edwin Layton, Pacific Fleet Intelligence Officer, asleep on a cot in his office. He shook him awake. "Sir, you need to see this." Layton read the message once. He looked up at Lassiter. His face had gone pale. "Get Admiral Nimitz, right now." 40 minutes later, 5 men sat in Admiral Chester Nimitz's office overlooking Pearl Harbor. Nimitz, Layton, Lassiter, Commander Joe Rochefort, who ran Station Hypo, and Captain Thomas Dyer, senior cryptanalyst. Nobody spoke for almost a minute. Layton broke the silence. "If we act on this information and kill Yamamoto, the Japanese will know we broke their codes." Rochefort leaned forward. "Not might know, will know. There's no way to explain this as coincidence. We'd be intercepting him at exactly the right time on a route we shouldn't know about. Japanese intelligence isn't stupid." Nimitz looked at the message again. "How certain are we this is accurate?" "Completely certain, sir," Rochefort said. "This came through the same code system we used at Midway. JN-25 variant. We've been reading it for over a year. It's solid." Dyer spoke up. "Sir, we need to consider what we're risking. Code JN-25 is the most valuable intelligence source in the Pacific. It tells us where Japanese carriers are operating. It tells us convoy routes. It tells us their operational plans before they execute them. If we lose this source, we're fighting blind again." Layton nodded. "Commander Dyer is right. This code is why we won at Midway. It's why our submarines are finding targets. It's why we know what the Japanese are planning. If they change their codes, all of that disappears." Nimitz looked at Lassiter. The young lieutenant hadn't said anything since delivering the message. "Lieutenant, what do you think?" Lassiter hesitated. Every cryptanalyst in the room had just argued against using the intelligence. They were right. Protecting the code was more important than killing one man. That was the logical answer. But Lassiter was thinking about his brother, burned alive in the forward magazine of the Arizona. He was thinking about 2,403 Americans killed at Pearl Harbor. He was thinking about the man who had planned that attack, who was still out there planning more attacks, who might plan the operation that would kill thousands more Americans. Sir, I think Yamamoto is the only Japanese admiral who truly understands carrier warfare. He's the reason they hit us at Pearl Harbor. He's the reason they nearly won at Coral Sea. If he's planning the next offensive, how many more Americans die before we get another chance like this? The room went quiet again. Nimitz stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at Pearl Harbor. The salvage crews were still working on the sunken battleships. The oil from the Arizona still leaked to the surface every day, a black stain that wouldn't go away. Gentlemen, I'm sending this to Washington. Admiral King needs to make this decision. The message went to Admiral Ernest King, Chief of Naval Operations. King took it to Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox. Knox took it to President Franklin Roosevelt. The question traveled up the chain of command in less than 8 hours. Should the United States risk its most valuable intelligence source to kill the man who attacked Pearl Harbor? Roosevelt's answer came back on April 14th. 3 words. Get Yamamoto. When Nimitz received the order, he called another meeting. This time the discussion wasn't about whether to do it. It was about how to do it without making it obvious. We need to make this look like a chance encounter, Nimitz said. A routine patrol that happened to intercept Japanese aircraft. Pure coincidence. Rochefort shook his head. No one will believe that, sir. I don't need them to believe it, Nimitz replied. I just need them to not be certain. If there's any doubt at all, any possibility it was random chance, the Japanese might not change their codes, that's all we need. Doubt. The operational problems were brutal. Yamamoto would be flying from Rabaul to Bougainville, over 400 miles from the nearest American base at Guadalcanal. The interception point would be approximately 435 miles away. No American fighter in the Pacific had that kind of range, except one. Admiral Mark Mitcher, commanding air operations in the Solomon Islands, confirmed it, the P-38 Lightning. Twin-engine fighter with external drop tanks could just barely make the distance, but it would require perfect navigation over open ocean with no landmarks, no radio communication, and no room for error. Miss the interception by 5 minutes or 10 miles and the fighters would run out of fuel and ditch in the ocean. Mitcher knew only one pilot who could pull it off. Major John Mitchell, 339th Fighter Squadron, the best navigation officer in the South Pacific. Mitchell could fly 400 miles over water and hit a target within minutes of the planned time. He had done it before on long-range bomber escort missions. On April 17th, Mitchell received orders to report to Mitcher's headquarters. When he arrived, Mitcher closed the door. John, I need you to fly the most important mission of this war, and I need you to do it with 0 mistakes. Mitcher spread a map across the table. Tomorrow morning, April 18th, 2 Japanese bombers with fighter escort will be flying along this route from Rabaul to Bougainville. You're going to intercept and destroy them. Mitchell studied the map. The interception point was 435 miles from Guadalcanal. He looked up at Mitcher. Sir, that's a 4-hour round trip. We'll be on fumes coming back. I know. And we'll have to fly the entire outbound leg at low altitude to avoid radar detection. No radio communication. Dead reckoning navigation for over 2 hours. Correct. Mitchell looked at the map again. Who's in those bombers? Mitcher paused. That's classified above your clearance level. What I can tell you is that this mission has been personally approved by Admiral Nimitz and President Roosevelt. That's how important it is. Mitchell understood. Admirals and presidents didn't approve routine interception missions. Someone very important was going to be in those bombers. "Can you do it?" Mitchell asked. Mitchell ran the calculations in his head. Heading 290 degrees, airspeed 200 knots, time to target approximately 127 minutes. He would have to navigate by compass and stopwatch for over 2 hours across empty ocean. If he was off by even 2 degrees, they would miss the target entirely. "I can do it, sir." "Then pick your pilots. You launch at first light." Mitchell selected 18 P-38 Lightnings. Each aircraft would carry 2 310-gallon external tanks. Total fuel capacity would give them about 4.5 hours of flight time. The mission as planned would take 4 hours and 15 minutes. That left 15 minutes of reserve. 15 minutes between success and swimming. That evening, Mitchell briefed his pilots. He still didn't tell them who they were hunting. That information was need to know, and they didn't need to know. He simply told them they were intercepting high-value targets, and the mission had been personally approved at the highest levels. Captain Thomas Lanphier, one of Mitchell's most aggressive pilots, raised his hand. "Sir, 435 miles? That's beyond our normal range. We'll be carrying external tanks, full fuel load. And if we run into weather, if we have to maneuver?" "Then we ditch in the ocean," Mitchell said. "But we're not going to run into weather. And we're not going to maneuver until we reach the target. We fly low, we fly straight, and we arrive exactly on time. Understood?" 18 pilots nodded. None of them slept well that night. Back at Station Hypo, the codebreakers monitored Japanese communications around the clock. They were watching for any sign that the operation had been compromised, any indication that the Japanese suspected something. There was nothing. Yamamoto's inspection tour was still scheduled. The Japanese were proceeding exactly as planned. April 18th, 1943. 5 a.m. fighter strip at Guadalcanal. 18 P-38 pilots walked to the flight line in the tropical darkness. The air was thick and hot. Their aircraft sat waiting, fuel tanks full, guns loaded, engines pre-flighted. Mitchell climbed into his cockpit and ran through his final navigation check one more time. Heading 290. Airspeed 200 knots. Time to target 127 minutes. He had to be perfect. If he was off by 5 minutes or 10 miles, the mission failed. At 7:10 a.m., the first P-38 rolled down the steel matting runway and lifted into the dawn sky. 17 more followed at 10-second intervals. They formed up over Guadalcanal, turned northwest, and dropped to 50 feet above the ocean. 4 aircraft immediately developed mechanical problems and turned back. That left 14 P-38s. 14 fighters to intercept and destroy 2 bombers and 6 fighters, 435 miles from home, with barely enough fuel to make it back. Major John Mitchell checked his compass heading and his watch. Right now, 760 miles to the north, Admiral Yamamoto was having breakfast before his flight. In exactly 2 hours and 24 minutes, their paths would cross. The most precisely planned fighter interception in history had begun. And 400 miles away, the man who planned Pearl Harbor had no idea he was already dead. 1 hour and 47 minutes into the flight, Lieutenant Besby Holmes realized he was probably going to die today. His fuel gauges were dropping faster than calculated. The math was simple. He didn't have enough gas to make it back to Guadalcanal. He could turn back now, abort the mission, maybe survive. Or he could keep flying toward whatever target was important enough for President Roosevelt to personally approve a mission that pushed every operational limit the P-38 Lightning had. Holmes stayed in formation. Whoever they were hunting was worth dying for. Major John Mitchell kept his P-38 at exactly 50 feet above the Pacific. Any higher and Japanese radar might detect them. Any lower and a single mistake meant hitting the water at 200 miles per hour. Behind him, 13 other Lightnings followed, their twin engines roaring as they skimmed the ocean surface. The cockpit temperature had climbed past 100 degrees. Mitchell's flight suit was soaked with sweat. He had been flying in absolute concentration for nearly 2 hours, staring at a compass heading, checking his stopwatch, seeing nothing but empty ocean in every direction. If his navigation was off by even 2 degrees, they would miss the interception entirely. 435 miles over open water. No landmarks, no radio. Just dead reckoning and mathematics and hope. Captain Thomas Lanfear flew on Mitchell's right wing, watching his fuel gauges. The numbers weren't adding up right. If they had to fight, if they burned extra fuel in combat, some of them weren't making it home. Lieutenant Rex Barber was thinking about the mission briefing. High-value targets, personally approved by Roosevelt. That meant someone extraordinarily important was in those Japanese bombers. Important enough to risk an entire fighter squadron, which raised the obvious question. How did American intelligence know exactly where those bombers would be? Barber had been in the Pacific long enough to understand that America was winning battles it shouldn't be winning. Midway had been impossible, except someone was reading Japanese codes. And if this mission succeeded, if they intercepted those bombers at exactly the right time and place, the Japanese would start asking questions America couldn't answer. At 1 hour and 57 minutes, Lieutenant Doug Canning broke radio silence. Landfall ahead. Mitchell checked his watch. 9:32 a.m. The Japanese bombers were scheduled to arrive at 9:35 a.m. He had navigated 435 miles across open ocean and arrived 3 minutes early. Perfect navigation. Now came the hard part. Mitchell raised his hand and pointed up. The 14 P-38s climbed from 50 feet to 5,000 feet. Mitchell leveled off and scanned the horizon. Empty sky. No aircraft visible. 9:33 a.m. 2 minutes until scheduled interception. Mitchell's chest tightened. If the Japanese didn't appear in the next 60 seconds, the intelligence was wrong. 9:34 a.m. 1 minute. Still nothing. 30 seconds. Mitchell's hand moved toward his radio, preparing to order the turn home. 20 seconds. The intelligence was wrong. They had flown 435 miles for nothing. 15 seconds. Mitchell started to raise his hand to signal the formation to turn south. Then Doug Canning's voice exploded over the radio. "Bogey's 11 o'clock low." There. 2 medium bombers, twin engine, flying 200 feet above the water, 6 fighters escorting above them, exactly where the decoded message said they would be, exactly when predicted. Mitchell had flown 435 miles and arrived within 1 minute of the predicted time. Every pilot understood immediately. Someone had broken Japanese codes, and if they killed whoever was in those bombers, the Japanese would figure it out. Mitchell's voice was sharp and clear. "Killer section, take the bombers. Cover section, get those zeros." The 14 P-38s split. 4 dove toward the bombers. 10 moved to intercept the zeros. 400 miles north, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto sat in a wicker chair in the lead bomber, reading inspection reports. The flight was routine. 6 Zero fighters provided escort. There was no reason to expect American aircraft. This route was flown regularly. The Americans didn't operate this far north. In the cockpit, the pilot saw them first. Aircraft diving from altitude. American P-38 Lightnings. His hand hit the alarm bell. The sharp ringing filled the cabin. Yamamoto looked up. The pilot pushed the throttles forward and turned hard left, trying to reach the jungle. Through the cockpit window, Yamamoto could see them. 4 P-38s diving fast. He had studied intelligence reports. Maximum P-38 range was 450 miles. Rabaul was over 400 miles from any American base. These fighters shouldn't be here. But they were. Lanfear came down almost vertically. The lead bomber was descending into the jungle. Lanfear had 5 seconds before losing his shot. His hand moved to the trigger. The P-38's nose guns fired. 4 50 caliber machine guns and 1 20mm cannon, all firing simultaneously. Lanfear's burst hit the bomber's right engine. The engine exploded. Flames erupted along the wing. Inside the cabin, the impact threw Yamamoto against the bulkhead. The aircraft rolled hard right. Smoke filled the cabin. The right wing was burning. The aircraft was falling. Through the smoke, Yamamoto saw jungle rushing up. He had planned Pearl Harbor. He had commanded at Midway. He had fought the greatest naval battles in history. And he was about to die because American fighters had somehow known exactly where he would be. The bomber hit the trees at 200 miles per hour. The impact broke the fuselage in half. 2 bullets from Lanfear's burst had hit Yamamoto. 1 through the left shoulder, 1 through the lower jaw. He was dead before the bomber hit the ground. The wreckage burned in the jungle. Black smoke rose above the canopy. The greatest naval strategist Japan had produced was dead exactly where American intelligence said he would be. Rex Barber went after the second bomber. The pilot pushed the nose down, headed for the water. Barber stayed with him. He closed to 200 yards and pressed the trigger. His guns tore into the tail section. He fired again. The left engine caught fire. The bomber hit the water 2 miles offshore and broke apart. Rear Admiral Ugaki survived. He would be pulled from the wreckage that afternoon. He would report that the American attack had been perfectly timed, perfectly executed, and impossible to explain as random encounter. Someone had known they were coming. Above, the air battle lasted 4 minutes. Mitchell shot down 1-0 in a head-on pass. Lieutenant Raymond Hine got separated. 2 Zeros jumped him. Hine was 23. He had a wife in San Diego and a baby daughter he had never met. He had survived 27 combat missions. Mission 28 killed him in 30 seconds. The Zero's cannons tore his P-38 apart. Hine's fighter went into the ocean at 300 miles per hour. No parachute, no body to recover. His daughter would grow up never knowing her father. The remaining Zeros broke off and turned north toward Rabaul. Mitchell checked his watch. 4 minutes 30 seconds. He keyed his radio. "Form on me. We're going home." The 13 surviving P-38s turned south. 435 miles to Guadalcanal. Fuel was critical. Several pilots were below minimum levels. Holmes watched his gauge drop. 9 gallons. 8. 7. The math said he wouldn't make it. His engine would quit 50 miles short, but he kept flying. Behind him, black smoke rose from the jungle where the most important man in the Japanese Navy had just died. At Station Hypo, 10:52 a.m., Japanese communications suddenly increased in volume. Rescue operations. Medical personnel scrambling to Bougainville. Then at 11:14 a.m., a message came through. Lieutenant Lassiter decoded it character by character. Commander-in-Chief lost. His hands started shaking. The man who planned Pearl Harbor was dead. The man who killed his brother was dead. Shot down because Lassiter had decoded a message 5 days earlier. He walked to Captain Layton's office without knocking. "We got him, sir. Yamamoto is dead." Layton stared at him for 3 seconds. Then he picked up the phone and called Admiral Nimitz. The P-38 started landing at 12:12 p.m. Holmes touched down with his gauges showing empty. Both engines died on the runway. Ground crew would later measure his remaining fuel at 4 gallons. 13 aircraft landed. Raymond Hine didn't come back. Mitchell filed his report. 2 bombers destroyed, 3 Zeros destroyed, One P-38 lost. Mission successful. Nobody told him who had been in those bombers, not that day, not for weeks. The pilots were ordered not to discuss it with anyone. They knew they had accomplished something extraordinary. They didn't know they had just killed the architect of Pearl Harbor. And they didn't know that Japanese intelligence officers were already asking the one question America couldn't afford to answer. How did the Americans know exactly where Admiral Yamamoto would be? April 19, 1943. Warrant Officer Hamasuna pushed through the jungle on Bougainville following the path of destruction. Broken trees, scorched earth, the smell of burned metal and aviation fuel. He had been ordered to find Admiral Yamamoto's body. He was hoping he wouldn't. The wreckage was scattered across 200 yards. Then he saw the seat. Admiral Yamamoto sat upright in his wicker chair, thrown clear of the wreckage. His white uniform gloves were perfect. His left hand gripped his katana sword. 2 bullet wounds, one through the shoulder, one through the jaw. His eyes were closed. The greatest naval commander Japan had produced. Dead in a jungle because American fighters had found him at exactly the right time in exactly the right place, on a route the Americans shouldn't have known about. The news reached Tokyo within 6 hours. Commander Nakajima at Navy Intelligence pulled the mission file immediately. Yamamoto's inspection tour, transmitted April 13th using JN25 code, departure 600 hours, route along Bougainville coast, arrival 800 hours. Then the interception report. American P-38 fighters, 14 aircraft, intercepted at 0935 hours, exact location matching the flight path, exact timing matching the schedule. P-38 maximum range 450 miles. Interception point 435 miles from Guadalcanal. Nakajima had been in intelligence for 17 years. He knew what coincidence looked like. This wasn't one. He picked up his pen and started writing his report. April 22nd, the Oval Office. President Roosevelt sat facing Admiral King, Secretary Knox, and Captain Layton. The question was simple. Should America announce it had killed Yamamoto? If we announce it, Layton said, we're telling them this wasn't random. We're telling them we had advance knowledge. Roosevelt looked at him. And if we stay silent? They might believe it was chance. That protects the code. King leaned forward. Mr. President, the American people have waited 16 months for payback. They deserve to know. They deserve to know, Roosevelt agreed. But do they deserve to lose the intelligence advantage that might win this war? The room went quiet. Roosevelt made his decision. We wait 3 weeks, monitor their communications. If they change codes, we know they suspected something. If not, we announce May 10th. At Station Hypo, Lieutenant Lassiter worked 18-hour shifts, searching every decoded message for keywords. Code security, encryption change, investigation. Anything suggesting the Japanese were questioning how the Americans had known. He found nothing until April 28th. Security review ordered. All communications procedures to be examined. Report findings by May 15th. Lassiter's hands shook. They were investigating. He walked to Layton's office without knocking. Sir, they're conducting a security review. They're looking for how we knew. Layton read the message. Have they mentioned code compromise? No, sir. But they're asking the right questions. May 3rd, Tokyo. Commander Nakajima sat across from Admiral Koga, Yamamoto's replacement. Nakajima had spent 2 weeks investigating and found nothing technically wrong with the codes. But the timing was impossible to explain. Admiral, the Americans intercepted at exactly 0935 hours, the scheduled arrival time, at exact coordinates of the flight path. P-38 fighters flew to the absolute limit of their range to a specific point at a specific time. This cannot be coincidence. Koga stared at him. You're suggesting they read our communications. I'm suggesting they had detailed advanced knowledge. The codes are unbreakable, our cryptographers assure me. Then we have a spy at Rabaul. Koga considered this. A spy was more believable than broken codes. Admitting code compromise would mean every operation had been visible to the enemy for months. Find the spy. But the codes remain unless you find evidence of compromise. Nakajima left knowing he had lost. No admiral wanted to report to the emperor that Japanese communications had been broken. May 11th, 3 weeks after Yamamoto's death. Admiral King authorized the announcement. American newspapers exploded. Yamamoto killed in planned ambush. The New York Times. Pearl Harbor architect shot down. The American public celebrated. Finally, revenge. In Tokyo, Commander Nakajima read the announcements and felt his stomach drop. Planned ambush. Not chance. Planned. The Americans were confirming everything he suspected. He immediately requested a meeting with Koga. They announced it was planned, Admiral. They knew where he would be. How? The security review at Rabaul had found no spies. The only remaining explanation was the one Japanese cryptographers said was impossible. The Americans had broken JN-25. Change the codes, Koga ordered. Operational by August. August 15, 1943. Station Hypo. Japanese naval communications went dark. New code variant. Everything they had learned over 18 months was obsolete. Captain Layton called an emergency meeting. Nobody looked happy. They changed the codes 4 months after Yamamoto. Did we win or lose? Commander Rochefort lit a cigarette. We traded 4 months of intelligence for their best admiral. In 4 months, we'll break the new codes. In 4 years, they still won't have another Yamamoto. Lassiter spoke quietly. Was it worth it, sir? Layton answered carefully. Lieutenant, Yamamoto understood carrier warfare better than anyone in their navy. He planned Pearl Harbor. He nearly won at Coral Sea. His replacement is competent, but he's not Yamamoto. In the battles to come, that will matter. But we can't read their codes. We'll break the new codes in weeks. We can't bring Yamamoto back from the dead. June 19, 1944. Battle of the Philippine Sea. American carrier aircraft massacred Japanese planes in the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Japan lost 3 carriers and 600 aircraft. Ratios of 10-1. Admiral Spruance later said if Yamamoto had commanded that battle, it would have gone differently. Yamamoto would have concentrated his forces. He would have made the Americans pay a higher price. October 1944. Battle of Leyte Gulf. The Imperial Japanese Navy was destroyed. After Leyte, Japan no longer had a functional fleet. The naval war was over. American post-war analysis concluded removing Yamamoto shortened the Pacific War by 18 to 24 months. The cost was 4 months without intelligence. The trade was worth it. Lieutenant Alva Lassiter remained at Station Hypo until war's end. He decoded thousands of messages. He helped break the new codes. He received commendations and promotion to lieutenant commander. But he never forgot April 13th, 1943. The night he decoded 7 words that killed a man. Yamamoto Inspection Tour, April 18th. Those words led to 18 fighters flying 435 miles. Those fighters killed the architect of Pearl Harbor, August 15th, 1945. Japan surrendered. Lassiter sat at his station staring at the decoded message. Then he walked outside and thought about his brother. USS Arizona, December 7th, 1941. The war was over. Yamamoto was dead. His brother was still dead. But 2,403 Americans who died at Pearl Harbor had been avenged, and millions who would have died in a longer war had been saved. Lassiter never knew if killing Yamamoto was right or wrong, but he knew it was necessary. In Tokyo, Yamamoto's grave became a place of pilgrimage. His sword, the one he died holding, remained with his family. In Bougainville, his bomber's wreckage rusted into the jungle. In San Diego, Margaret Hine raised her daughter alone. She kept Raymond's Purple Heart framed on the wall. She told her daughter that her father died doing something important. She never knew what. The mission remained classified until 1960. In California, Besby Holmes returned home and survived 47 more combat missions. When reporters asked about the mission years later, he always said the same thing. "We did what needed to be done." Major John Mitchell, who navigated 435 miles and arrived within 1 minute of target time, received the Navy Cross. He never took credit for the kill. He always said his job was getting everyone there and back. Lanfear and Barber got glory. Mitchell got satisfaction knowing his navigation was perfect. The Yamamoto assassination established something new in warfare. Targeted killing of enemy commanders became acceptable. What America did to Yamamoto in 1943, it would do to others in decades that followed. The precedent was set. But in April 1943, none of that mattered. What mattered was the man who planned Pearl Harbor was dead. What mattered was American fighters had flown further than anyone thought possible. What mattered was one decoded message, read by one young lieutenant who lost his brother, had changed the Pacific War. Commander Nakajima spent the rest of his career wondering if he could have prevented it, if he had pushed harder for code changes in April instead of May, if he had made Koga believe the Americans could read their communications. But orders are orders. Admirals make decisions, and sometimes the Americans are just better code breakers than anyone wants to believe. Yamamoto died with his sword in his hand like a samurai. The Americans killed him with mathematics like engineers. In the end, the engineers won the war.